Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Natalie Irwin, Director of Stakeholder Engagement here at Efficiency Canada. I'm coming to you from our nation's capital, Ottawa, Ontario, which is also the Algonquin unceded territories. Welcome to another Friday Discovery session with Efficiency Canada and friends. Before we get started, just a reminder to everyone that our guest speaker will present for approximately 20 minutes, and then we'll open the floor to questions. Feel free during the meantime to put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Once we get to the Q&A period, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can ask your question yourself. Two ways to ask questions here. And we do have a hard stop at 12:45 p.m. Eastern time so that everyone can finish their lunch, their breakfast, their afternoon snack, depending where on the country or in the world you are, maybe midnight snack. So without further ado, I am pleased to welcome our guests from FortisBC, who will be sharing their plans on how they're working towards delivering on the promise of CleanBC's ambitious vision for decarbonizing by 2050. And FortisBC actually has an interim target to reduce customer emissions by 30% by 2030, which is actually one of North America's most ambitious greenhouse gas reduction goals for a natural gas utility. Please join me in welcoming Tyler Brandt, Public Policy Manager for FortisBC. Welcome today, Tyler.
Thank you very much, Natalie. And I apologize for the elevated blood pressure that happened just 5 minutes ago as we were trying to get the Zoom sound working. But
no worries. It's never happened before.
yes, I don't believe you, but okay. So usually Zoom works fantastic for me, but of course the moment right before you're supposed to give a presentation, something happens with the sound. But anyways, thank you everybody for patching in. I'm very happy to be here. Let me just get some introductions out of the way. Actually, the first thing I wanted to say is that I work here out at FortisBC in British Columbia in the Lower Mainland, which means that FortisBC extends across the province, serving 135 communities, and including 57 Indigenous communities. And I work mostly from the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish people here in the southern coast area of British Columbia. About myself, I have been working at FortisBC for about 4 years now. I'm our low carbon policy and strategy manager. So my role, I have a finger in a lot of different pies, but it's mostly to help inform, steer, guide, strategize, what have you, engage with stakeholders on all aspects to manage FortisBC's transition to being a low carbon or decarbonized utility here in the province. So it's been a very interesting role. Previous to that, I have energy efficiency is near and dear to my heart. So I was the program manager, or the project manager of the International Energy Agency's energy efficiency market report. So I was kind of one of the original people that kind of conceived and developed and built that report out over 4 years at the IEA. And so I worked fairly in-depth across all of our member companies around energy efficiency. So if we want, we can talk just in general about energy efficiency. I have lots of kind of perspectives or whatever, can really chew the fat on that if you want. And then I worked at the David Suzuki Foundation, doing energy transition work, and with Natural Resources Canada. So it's kind of a bunch of different roles. As I like to say, I've kind of been involved in the four major food groups of energy policy stuff. So working with government, international organization, ENGO, and now with a large, corporation that delivers energy. Okay, so can everybody can see this? I hope yes. So. Let's see.
We
Okay,
can still see
great.
You're perfect.
Okay, I'm just moving on now. So we have 20 minutes or less than that. I'll try and run this up fairly quickly. I'm going to throw a lot at you, but what I've been helping to lead here at FortisBC is a lot of our work on visioning out to the future. What type of utility will FortisBC what kind of utility will FortisBC be in a decarbonized future, a future that achieves BC's long-term greenhouse gas reduction targets. Okay, so what I'm going to describe to you today is some analysis that we did, some scenarios that we did, and maybe some interesting findings on kind of how to consider a gas utility, what type of levers a gas utility has available, and what role it might have in a long-term decarbonized future. I think that a lot of people may have opinions on that. I hope to maybe challenge those and open up a conversation on, just what role FortisBC has. I'm emphasizing the gas, but just a bit about FortisBC. We're actually an integrated gas and electric utility. So in case you're not familiar, FortisBC is a subsidiary of Fortis Inc. Fortis Inc. is a utility holding company that holds 12 utilities across North America, including the Bahamas. And we are the largest kind of utility by customer count in the Fortis Inc. family. And FortisBC has been around in some iteration for over 100 years. So going all the way back to West Kootenay Power, it was originally an electric utility. And you see there in that yellow zone there, FortisBC owns 4 hydroelectric dams along the Columbia River, in BC. And we also own about 50,000 kilometers of pipelines throughout the province to deliver natural gas. So we were, by that measure, we're actually the largest. Well, how do I say this? We deliver more energy to British Columbians than any other entity in the province. We deliver more energy even than BC Hydro. So a big part of BC's energy system. And we have ambitious plans to make investments in improving the system and to be low carbon. So let's get on to the actual topic at hand. So just a bit of history on FortisBC and our experience in providing low carbon solutions. So what we see here is kind of our first, or one of our most meaningful kind of public statements on who and what FortisBC thought we would be to achieve BC's long-term greenhouse gas reduction targets. Specifically, what we said is that we were going to invest significantly in 4 action areas between now and 2030, and actually beyond to 2050. So those action areas would be energy efficiency, obviously. So we're one of Canada's we're Canada's second largest private investor in energy efficiency. We will be investing upwards of $100 million this coming year in energy efficiency, and we are putting together a DSM plan as we speak. That'll go out from next year for the following 5 years, and you can expect that we will be even more ambitious than that on our energy efficiency investments. Renewable gas, that's another kind of area of expertise of FortisBC. So we just celebrated our 10th year anniversary of having a voluntary renewable gas program. So our customers can sign up to get renewable natural gas. We're by far the longest in the tooth on renewable gas and utilities in North America. So we've been operating that program for 10 years, and we have ambitious plans there to expand our portfolio of renewable gases significantly between now and 2030. So expanding to about 15% or more of our total throughput in renewable gases. We're investing in low carbon transportation, and we also have potentially opportunities to reduce carbon intensity of, say, shipping traffic, international shipping traffic to Vancouver's ports. So Vancouver has the second busiest port in North America, and those ships, there's about 1,000 ships that call into Vancouver ports every year, and they consume heavy fuel oils, diesel, and stuff like that. And there's an opportunity to use something like LNG that would reduce their emissions by about 30%, just a one hit off. So kind of a very sizable opportunity to reduce emissions there. Anyways, that's what we said in our clean growth pathway. And that's how we informed the government's approach to developing their climate plan. And then what we see here is the province of BC's climate plan that was released in 2018. It's called CleanBC, and CleanBC, made specific overtures in terms of the role of the gas system to help it achieve its greenhouse gas reduction targets. So just looking specifically at the building sector, so there's targets, there's basically reduction goals for all the sectors and buildings. That 15% renewable gas target that I just was discussing achieves 75% of all of the building greenhouse gas emission reductions that they need to achieve by 2030. So it's a huge part of their overall buildings reduction strategy. And then of course, energy efficiency, DSM, what have you, is the other big component. FortisBC's involved there. So needless to say, we've had a lot of success in terms of explaining what our solutions are, getting kind of buy-in across stakeholders, and getting policies in order for us to go and do that. As Natalie said, that fed into us developing our 30 by 30 target, which is, I think, the first target of its type for a gas primary utility in North America. So we're going to reduce our customers' emissions by about 30% by 30% by 2030. So that would be about a 4 million ton reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030. So it would be incredibly sizable. And so we've gotten a lot of good feedback on that. We've gotten a lot of kind of good working relationships. But one of the key pieces of feedback we got is, well, that's great for FortisBC to get to 2030, but hey, 2030 is just an interim step in the path. Like, we actually need to get to deep decarbonization if we're going to stabilize our global climate system. And so that's a big challenge for you. What are you going to do about that? What's your long-term vision? And that was good feedback. And so that's what I want to actually talk to you today about in a bit more detail. So we did a study with Guidehouse, which is formerly Navigant, and they worked with another firm that operates the Canadian Energy System Simulator, the CANS model. And we did a kind of a fairly well-known type of exercise where we developed scenarios to get to BC's greenhouse gas reduction goals in 2050. So we said, hey, how do we get to that 80% reduction by 2050? And Guidehouse build different pathways for BC to get there. And so one of the big interests of FortisBC, as I was just saying, is, we've been operating in the province for about 100 years. We have 1.2 million customers. We like to think that we know BC rather well. We've had, a strong presence in this province now for over a century. And we know that BC is a somewhat idiosyncratic place, and it has, different attributes and that kind of thing that we need to take a specific look at. So what am I saying here is that we need made in BC type of solutions to greenhouse gas abatement. And one of the concerns of Fortis was that, what works in other jurisdictions may not work, or, challenges in other jurisdictions may not be challenges in BC, or similarly opportunities may be challenges. And so we need to really kind of open up the issue here, peel back the layers, so to speak, and look at BC in particular. What are some things that make BC unique? We have a hydroelectric system, a predominantly hydroelectric system. That's great from a greenhouse gas emissions perspective. It means for the past 6 decades that we've built that infrastructure out, we have avoided all emissions from our power sector. It's not great when you set an absolute reduction target and your power sector is already clean. So what that essentially means is you've taken a very viable sector by which to reduce emissions from off the table. And so the challenge to reduce -80 is actually much more severe here in BC than, say, in a place that has a relatively emissions-intensive power sector, say like in California, where they have a lot of natural gas-fired generation. You can kind of divine a future where you use renewable power and you slowly wind that down. You can make a really big dent in your overall emissions. That opportunity, frankly, just isn't there for BC. The other thing that's unique about BC, and we'll spend some time on this, is that we have, cold weather here. Cold weather, relatively speaking, at least to California. I know there's people probably patching in from all over the country, so we don't have necessarily that cold weather compared to places like maybe Ontario or Newfoundland, where Fortis Inc. headquarters is. But we'll discuss this cold weather issue. It's critical in terms of decarbonization. It's something that we're really only now just starting to wrap our heads around. Okay, so that's the lead into why we're doing this. Here are the 2 pathways. We developed lots of pathways. We eventually grouped into 2 key pathways, and here they are. So we looked at kind of an electrify everything type of pathway, and we looked at what we call the diversified pathway. And really, the diversified pathway is instructions to Guidehouse where, well, keep a meaningful role for the gas system. And we kind of simulated that by saying, keep the load or the amount of energy we deliver on the gas system the same in 2050 as it is today. But don't forget, we have to hit that 80% reduction target. That's the objective function of this work, okay? So just very quickly, what's going on in both scenarios? So probably will not surprise you to know that energy efficiency is being pulled, that lever is being pulled about as hard as you can pull it in either scenario. In the diversified pathway, we're doing significant improvements in building in the thermal load of buildings in both scenarios. In fact, we're doing lots of energy efficiency retrofits. We're driving that thermal load down by about 75% in this case. The one key difference is that gas heat pumps become the incumbent technology for users connected to the gas system in buildings. And so, over the next 30 years, gas heat pumps end up occupying the largest share of heating systems by 2050, but there's still heating systems happening all over. So electric heat pumps, gas furnaces, hybrid systems, you name it. Fuel switching, so that's you substitute fossil fuels for lower carbon fuels or no carbon fuels. So that's really the bailiwick of the electrification pathway. So there we see there that 100% of building heat and hot water goes over to a high efficiency electric heat pump. There's fuel switching in the diversified pathway. There's fuel switching from natural gas to renewable gas. We'll spend some time on that. And there is still some fuel switching to electric. This is one thing I want to leave with you is the diversified pathway is not the gas pathway. There's still lots of electrification also happening in the diversified pathway as well. So specifically, say for transport, both pathways have 100% electrified passenger duty fleets. There's a difference though in terms of commercial vehicles. So those medium heavy duty vehicles, it's kind of an open question what the incumbent technology is there. And so in the diversified pathway, a majority of those go to a gaseous powertrain, so fuel cells or compressed or liquefied natural gas. And the transportation pathway and electrification pathway, obviously they go to like a battery electric type of technology. That's consistent with 80% because the gas system largely flips over to delivering low carbon and renewable gases. So in terms of our overall energy supply, 14% is renewable gas. That's up from, essentially less than 1% today. And 37% of all the energy we consume is electrification. So that's up from 20% today. So still significant amounts of electrification happening. Diversified pathway, just not as much as the electric pathways you see there. Almost 50% of all the energy we consume in 2050 is electric. Okay, so that's both pathways. Sorry, I threw a lot at you there. Key thing is electrification pathway, obviously lots of electrification, diversified pathway, some like heightened electrification, but also lots of renewable gases. So you put all this stuff into the CAN-S model. It's like the BAT computer, and it spits out it spits out what it thinks emissions or what it thinks your energy system kind of evolves to look like in 2050. And here we see emissions in both scenarios. And what we see here is that both scenarios kind of get to that same level of emission reductions by 2050. So the key point there is that it's not necessarily, so maintaining a role for the gas system is not necessarily incompatible with your long-term greenhouse gas reduction goals. There is potentially a lot of greenhouse gas reduction potential in the gas system itself, depending on what you think of what we can do with renewable gases and energy efficiency and what have you. So where are the emission reductions coming from in both scenarios in 2050? So here we're seeing, like, by big theme, 2050 we've reduced about 40 megatons. Where is that coming from? So obviously electrification pathway, almost 2/3 of that is coming from electrification. That makes sense. But then we see in the diversified pathway, low carbon gases and electrification are delivering about the same amount of greenhouse gas emission reductions. Then you see there energy efficiency. I wouldn't actually read too much into why energy efficiency is higher in electrification. This is actually more of a categorization issue of how you divide up the emission reductions. But what I like to think is that energy efficiency is kind of delivering a similar amount of greenhouse gas emissions reductions, by 2050. the takeaway for me or for FortisBC is that this may be a more resilient approach to greenhouse gas abatement, in fact, in the diversified pathway, because you're spreading a wider net. So you're trying to achieve greenhouse gas reductions across a broader suite of actions and a broader pieces of infrastructure. So both the gas system, the gas delivery system, and the electrification system. The problem with the electrification pathway, or not, maybe not the problem, but one of the issues could be, that's kind of the all eggs in your one basket approach. That really needs to work for you. And what we'll look at in a second here is maybe some challenges with that. So that's kind of the main point of the study, is that, both pathways can get to that goal. The other kind of key insight that the study surfaced for us was the challenge, where the challenges. There's significant challenges in getting to deep decarbonization here in BC, and both of those challenges orbit this issue of peak heat. How are we going to decarbonize heat? So a couple of reflections on heat. That's basically FortisBC's, at least on the gas side, that's our business, is providing heat. So natural gas is used almost exclusively for either heat in buildings, water heating, what have you, or for industrial heating. And heat is by far the largest energy end use in BC. So almost half of all the energy we consume in the province is for heat, either industrial heating or heating in our building sector. And the issue with heating that I'm going to show you here is that it's incredibly peaky. So it really fluctuates depending on the time of the year. And so if you're going to meet people's heating needs, you need a system that is built out to be able to have the storage or the capacity available to meet those peaks. And this is going to be a massive challenge. So here's a summer day. This is a day in the life on the FortisBC system. So this is 24 hours on the bottom axis here. And this is the amount of gas we're delivering on, or amount of energy, I guess, we're delivering at any 1 hour. So I've converted terajoules of gas over to gigawatts of electric capacity. So 10 terajoules of gas is 3,600 megawatts of electrical capacity. So if you're delivering that much, you would need about delivering 10 terajoules of gas, you would need a 3,600 megawatt generator to deliver that same amount of energy. So there's a summer day. That's basically industrial energy load and people's water heaters. You go up to a winter day, we're at now 3.5 times higher than our summer day, and we're delivering close to 10,000 megawatts of electric generating capacity. We go to our coldest day in 2019, and we're 5 times higher now. So we have a ramp rate of about 5 times over the course of the year between our summer low and our winter high. And at any one point now on this chart, FortisBC is delivering more than the maximum output of our provincial electricity system. The difference between this top blue line and the bottom yellow line is all building heating need, essentially. So that's a lot of energy. But then in 2020, we had quite a cold day. In fact, the second coldest day on record for the utility. And we were delivering 6.5 times the amount of, the equivalent to 18,000 megawatts of electric generating capacity. That's 60% more energy than the maximum output of our provincial electricity system. We see here the dotted lines is the load on the electricity system on those same days. So a couple of reflections. The band, the variance between the low and the high is a lot smaller. So it's about, it's a lot smaller than the gas system, and it just does not have nearly the peaking capacity to meet those cold winter days. And so the point here is obvious. If we're going to decarbonize this, we have a huge challenge on our hands. Even with high efficiency air source heat pumps, the scale of the heat demand, 18,000 megawatts, is massive. And so Guidehouse looked at this and said, well, if we were to electrify everything in the electrification scenario, you would need approximately 9,000 megawatts of new peak generating capacity. So this is not wind and solar. This is firm generating capacity. So this is generating capacity with storage. So it could be wind and solar and a crap ton of batteries or hydroelectric facilities. The diversified pathway also has about 5,000 megawatt increase, but critically that's about 4,000 less than the electrification pathway, that really matters when you add up all the costs. Okay, so if you say, wow, I don't think we can build another 6 hydroelectric dams in the province, so let's not do that. There's no free lunch in decarbonization, so if you're going to make up the difference between that gray line and the yellow line, something else has to fill the gap, some other low carbon energy carrier. And that is obviously renewable gas. So the second challenge is if we think we can't build out our peak supply, then we need to build out some other low carbon energy carrier. And that means that the gas system would need to significantly expand the amount of renewable gases it's delivering. So that would be RNG, RNG from woody biomass or from biomass waste from the pulp and paper sector, for example, and of course, hydrogen. And so if you, BC has actually immense potential to produce renewable gases. We have a lot of forestry activity, for example. A share of our economy of forestry is about 5 times greater than a place like California. So there's definitely potential there, but it'll be a big lift, you know. So assuming that you can actually address either one of these challenges, we added up the numbers on what it would cost. And the conclusion was pretty interesting in that the renewable gas pathway, even though renewable gases are much more expensive, so they're about $20 to $30 per gigajoule as compared to about $3 a gigajoule right now for regular natural gas, it would still be significantly cheaper, about $100 billion less costly to build out that supply than it would be to build the peak generating infrastructure on the electric side. And so that's an interesting finding. We have been kind of working through that. FortisBC has been kind of developing a renewable gas plan, and there's lots of activity happening there. With respect to energy efficiency and how that plays out, I mean, any opportunity that we can choose to avoid those peak loads or that amount of renewable gas, we should take. And we're doing some new analysis now on just what be the roles of if we actually coupled these two sectors together. So if we use something like hybrid heating technologies, say a high efficiency gas furnace and an air source heat pump, and we use those to moderate the peak needs, what might that have? And that looks to be a very interesting high efficiency solution to treat a hybrid solution, gas and electric, as one, as a system, as a heating system, a high efficiency heating system that could avoid those peak loads. Anyways, that's kind of what I wanted to put out to you today. I threw a lot at you. I went a bit over time. Sorry, Natalie, but I tried to go as quick as possible. And I thank you for your attention.
Awesome. Thank you so much for Tyler. That was really insightful. It was nice to see FortisBC's, up close and personal plan for the future and where you're going to be headed. Before I open the floor to questions, again, to everyone who didn't catch it at the beginning, we do record these sessions and we put them up on our website. And we're usually able to get them up by midweek the following week. So you can find it under the education tab on our website. And also another reminder that we do have one rule, which is the same rule that we have for our presenters. And that is no sales pitches, please. And this includes statements disguised as questions. And so again, 2 ways to ask questions. One, raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can ask your question yourself. The second way is I see people are already keen to put their questions in the Q&A box. And since I have control, I'm actually going to ask the first question here, Tyler. You opened it up by saying, which I love, you have a background in the 4 major food groups, which I love that. I have a similar background myself. But it's quite unique actually. So I'm wondering, for those that have only worked in maybe 1 or 2 of the sectors, I'd love for you to share one insight that you learned in each of them that kind of gave you the viewpoint that you have now.
Yeah, so that's that's a great question. So maybe just to ring off just off the top of my head, and this I hope is insightful, but it may not be. So I worked at federal government. Natural Resources Canada. There, I learned the importance of process and basically, for lack of a better way to put it, group work. Getting people from different organizations, different parts of your organization, working together for a common goal. That's a huge part of just normal work in a professional environment on this. And coming out of grad school, I didn't appreciate how important that was. So that's one thing I learned. At the Suzuki Foundation, I learned the importance of broad collaboration, the importance of stakeholder engagement, of hearing people out and incorporating their feedback meaningfully. That's a really important part. And then taking that and motivating them to act. And so Suzuki really taught me the importance of robust engagement. The IEA taught me what didn't the IEA teach me, but the IEA taught me the importance of meeting your deadlines and being organized and doing high quality analysis. And then here at FortisBC, I'm learning just how valuable it is to be creative and opportunistic and never missing an opportunity to make some change. And so there's tons of activity going on, and you really need to kind of find that groove and be strategic and advance your agenda. Because if you don't, nobody else will.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Tyler. I'm sure a number of people were interested in that themselves, so I wanted to ask that question. Now I'm going to go.
But that could be a whole webinar, in all
Yeah,
honesty, Natalie, of
that is very
all the
true.
different things.
That
Yeah,
is right.
yeah,
Maybe we'll have to get you back for one of our becoming
Sure,
series that we have.
sure.
We'll definitely, if I know my colleague Kelsey is watching, so I'm going to make note of that. So floor for questions. First question is actually from Joshua. So can you comment on some of the planned sources for low carbon gas to get to the diversified pathways targets?
Yes. So this could be also a whole webinar, but just to low carbon gas, renewable gas. Geez, where do we begin? I have a couple thoughts there. I like to open this issue with kind of maybe a little idiom. So we really haven't given the good college try on renewable gases yet, on green gases. And what I like to say is, 25 years ago, I posted on Twitter actually a chart of solar PV costs through time. And so 25 years ago, solar PV costs were, very high in the dollars per megawatt, and we only had about 800 megawatts of PV installed back in around 1998, 1999. 800 megawatts worldwide. Now we counted in gigawatts per year that we're installing solar PV, and the costs are, of course, cents per watt now. Well, guess what? There's only about 800 megawatts of hydrogen electrolyzers installed worldwide right now. And we really haven't, we're just at the beginning of this type of journey on something like hydrogen, and it's being unlocked by stuff like solar costs coming down. So my point is that we are going to be seeing significant innovation and potential on renewable gases, specifically on hydrogen. The other renewable gases, though, are just their bog standard biogas, or biomethane. So we can use that with traditional waste. There's not a ton of feedstock for that, but there's still a meaningful amount. And then we can also move to a second generation type of biomethane that uses woody feedstocks from our wood waste. So pulp and paper sector, forestry waste, that type of stuff. And there's a lot more potential for that. So in total, what we see in the diversified pathway is 130 petajoules. That's on the upper end of what we think the potential is in BC, but it's still within the potential. So we used basically independent assessments of how much potential there was in BC, and we stayed within that.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I know another question here that Antonio's interested in, and I don't know if you could answer this quickly because someone else answered it and shared a link from the FortisBC website with the more detailed response, but I'm sure other people are wondering, like, what defines or what constitutes renewable natural gas? And I know we have another whole discovery session
Sure.
in that one as well, which we've actually done. So
So what constitutes renewable? How deep down the rabbit hole do we want to go here?
yeah.
I'll just say, typically it's from a biogenic feedstock. So it's from biogenic carbon that we can reduce down into methane through different types of conversion technologies, depending on where the carbon is stored. So you can use a pyrolysis type of technology, that's a gasification for wood. You can use anaerobic digestion for more carbon-rich type of waste, like municipal solid waste or that type of thing. And then hydrogen is altogether a completely different molecule, and you can use either electrolysis with renewable power, or you can use natural gas as the feedstock. But if you use carbon capture and sequestration with that natural gas, and you are really studious about capturing all that carbon, that can also be a very low carbon source of hydrogen as well.
That was a very succinct answer.
Yeah.
That was well done. And actually, Angela has a question here on methane, since you mentioned methane, and I'm sure other people are curious. Does renewable natural gas have the same methane leakage risks as natural gas?
Good question. So there's methane leakage kind of across the gas supply system. And so in some respects, renewable natural gas can lead to much less methane leakage. Say on a place, say like in a wastewater treatment facility that doesn't have capture, or a landfill that doesn't have capture. Oftentimes you see what we call the carbon intensity of biogas from those sources as being negative. So if you use that, you're actually pulling out carbon from the atmosphere by avoiding all the methane waste. Um, but yes, it also is using the gas system, and the gas system needs to continuously improve the amount of fugitive methane that's coming off of the system. A couple of points there. That's an area of high interest for FortisBC, is reducing that, and we are engaging in a number of strategies to reduce our methane leakage across the system. And as the system gets kind of renewed, so as pipelines get replaced, better pipelines, PVC pipe, those plastic piping that has a lot better, uh, leakage containment, that will improve. But yes, methane leakage across the gas system needs to be reduced, just as a general order of business between now and 2050.
Thank you for that, Tyler. A question here, actually, a great question from Jesse is, how do you see this plan or these plans potentially translating to other jurisdictions across the country?
Yeah, so that's a great question too. So I talked about our heat load here in BC, but man, it gets even worse when you look obviously at colder parts of BC. So when I said that our peak load on the gas system was 60% higher than BC Hydro's peak load, or the peak load on our electricity system, well, guess what? When you look at Ontario, the peak load on Ontario's gas system, I believe, is 5 times greater than the peak load on the summer peak on its electricity system. So actually the issue is just even more severe where there's cold weather. And delivering heat is kind of not something to be messed with, right? Like we saw that kind of unfold tragically in Texas this year, right? Where basically they had a peak heating event. They got hit with very cold weather, and their system basically collapsed in the face of that peak heating event. Lots of discussion, lots of tongue wagging about what happened in Texas. As I understand it, and I'm just another talking head here with an opinion on that, but as I understand it, um, what that demonstrated was just how massive a heat load can be on your system if you're not prepared for it. Like if you do get really cold weather, the amount of heat that your system needs to be able to deliver is huge. And basically Texas's system was just not even close to being resilient enough to handle that. That's something when we think about decarbonization, like we can never lose sight of the table stakes of something like utility that has a duty to serve. Like it is not good enough to not deliver people's energy, right? And so how do we think about it? The challenge for utilities like FortisBC is really a three-legged stool. We got to decarbonize, but we also have to strengthen the resiliency of the system, and we must maintain affordability, right? And so when we're developing our strategies and plans, those three things are all kind of pushing and pulling and whatever together, and that's how we're trying to navigate this path forward.
Awesome. And just so people know, I'm going to go like probably 3 minutes over here just because we did a start late, and there's an interesting question here. Because Tyler, you did mention Texas, and I always said that what happened in Texas was really interesting for me personally. I found is that a lot of people that had electric vehicles ended up using them as their
Yeah,
heat source or to charge their cell phone to reach loved ones. And I thought that was, what a great advertisement for electric vehicles. So we actually have a question here from Duncan here on electric vehicles. So
sure.
for the electric vehicle policy, what significance and role is FortisBC planning for focusing on micro mobility? Example, lightweight electric vehicles, less than 1,000 pounds, such as electric bikes, electric cargo bikes, etc., or at all?
Wow, great question. So this is pivoting into our electric part of the business, and so just maybe I'll just use this as an opportunity to just congratulate Fortis, pat ourselves on the back. We by the end of this year we will have deployed over 40 public charging stations across our electric service territory, and we are doing a ton of work. So that's incredibly fast and ambitious. We've basically built out public charging in our service territory now, and we're providing those solutions to all of our ratepayers or people that are just passing through the Okanagan, the central area of BC, south central area of BC. So um, in terms of micromobility, this is an area of interest for our electric resource plan. So we're trying to kind of, in our resource plan, we kind of peer into the future and try and figure out, geez, how much electric load are we going to need? How much blah, blah, blah are we going to need? And so electric mobility is a big part of new load, and electric mobility, including that micro mobility, we don't really know, right? But I personally, so I have an EV as well, and I don't have an e-bike. I'm still young enough that I don't want to go to the e-bike route. I still want to use pedal power. But looking around, it looks to be incredibly sizable and significant. Maybe not the load, but the amount of adoption that there's going to be in the next 3 decades. And I'm honestly really excited for that.
Yeah, you and me both for sure. And
Mhm.
I'm thinking of an electric bike, but it's not because of my age. It's because of my my performance skill set, I think. So thank you so much for joining us today, Tyler. That was a fantastic conversation. And I will connect you with my colleague Kirsten, who does our becoming sessions, because I think you have a lot of insights to share there. But speaking of my colleagues, next week we're going to actually be joined by Kelsey Brazil, who's our project manager looking after an exciting project we have been working on and will be launching soon, which is the Energy Efficiency Career Hub. So learn more about this project. It's open to both organizations as well as individuals who are looking to an energy efficiency as a meaningful and rewarding career path. So it's sure to be another insightful one, folks. I hope you join me. And actually, Corey Diamond, our executive director, is going to be here next week chatting with Kelsey. Have a fantastic weekend. Thank you again, Tyler, and take care, everyone. Bye-bye.